What's up, everyone? Brothers War is coming out, and it is a set that I'm incredibly excited about. As I saw card previews coming through and remembering the story of the Brothers War, I got really amped up for this set. So even though I haven't done a video in quite some time, I wanted to come out with this one, talking about what I believe are going to be the top 10 cards for Standard, which is the primary format that I play. While going through the set, I picked the cards that I believe are impactful, are going to make a difference, and you're going to want to play around or play with them to really make a difference in the game. So that's how I selected this top 10. Um, I hope you like it. If you have any other opinions, I would love to hear them in the comments. I'd like to hear if there's a card that I missed that you really believe should be there, um, and then we can talk about it for sure. That'd be awesome. Also, don't forget to subscribe. I don't post videos very often, but if you like hearing about cards or talking about cards, occasionally you might see a video of mine pop up, and it'll be a fun watch for you. So, going into it, first disclaimer I always do is I do not include the cards in my top 10 that are lands. Reason being, lands, especially the dual colored ones, they would take top one spot, be a four-way tie, only gives me room for six more cards to talk about. That would just be boring. So I'm not including the lands, but do realize that those are going to be the most popular or the most important ones for solid deck building, especially in standard, where it's all about multiple colors now. So the pain lands are awesome. Another thing I did not include in my top 10, but are going to be very, very powerful and people are going to be building decks around, are going to be the Meld cards. So we've got Mishra and Phyrexian Dragon that meld together into a one more powerful card. That's going to be Mishra Lost to Phyrexia. They're not in my top 10 because they take two cards to make one, so I don't think that's really fair to put in the top 10. That's more about the just one cards. But I do want to talk about it. There's this one, there's Erza, and then there's a green card that I think is good, but not nearly as good as Mishra or Erza. So I'm going to talk about Mishra and Erza. Um, First off, the two cards by itself are already pretty powerful, and without any accelerants by turn 5, you can help the meld effect. So Phyrexian Dragon Engine is a three mana card that's an artifact creature, Phyrexian Dragon. That's a 2/2 with double strike. By itself, aggressive, not great, but not bad. What makes it pretty good is the Unearth ability for 3 red and a red. You can bring it back from the graveyard for a turn with haste. When it enters the battlefield from your graveyard, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 3 cards. That's a pretty solid effect later in the game. Also, if you have Mishra and you want to bring your Phyrexian back for that meld effect, that's a really nice little insurance there to get those cards on the battlefield at the same time if you're not curving out into it. Mishra claimed by Gix by itself is a pretty good aggressive card as well. Whenever you attack, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of attacking creatures. If Mishra claimed by Gix and a creature named Phyrexian Dragon Engine are attacking and you both own and control them, exile them, then meld them into Mishra Lost to Phyrexia. It enters the battlefield tapped and attacking. That on its own, like even without the meld effect for 2 black and a red on a 3/5 body, is not bad. It's a nice little aggressive engine that gives you some life back. But really, when you get into the Mishra Lost to Phyrexia, it's when things get really crazy, and your opponent's going to want to do something real quick to it. Otherwise, the game will end fast. Because whenever Mishra Lost to Phyrexia enters the battlefield or attacks, choose 3. Target opponent discards 2 cards. Mishra deals 3 damage to any target. Destroy target artifact or planeswalker. Creatures you control gain menace and trample until end of turn. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 until end of turn. And create 2 tapped Power Stone tokens. And that on a 9/9 body. That'll on turn 5, if you can curve out into it, is pretty incredible. So that's why I think this is a very, very powerful card. And I think the fact that this has this effect on enter the battlefield or attack makes this very, very powerful, and I think actually better than the Erza meld effect. Now, if we go to the Erza version, I think Erza by itself is actually a better card than Mishra is. Erza Lord Protector is 1 a white and a blue for a legendary creature, Human Artificer, and it's a 2/4. Artifact, instant, and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, which is a pretty broad little cheaper way to cast all your spells, because if you're in these colors, that's probably what you're going to do a lot. Then for 7, if you both own and control Erza, Lord Protector, an artifact named a Mightstone and a Weakstone, exile them, then meld them into Erza Planeswalker, activate only as a sorcery. 7 mana sounds like a lot, but this is the same thing where you can curve out into it in turn 5, because you play Erza on turn 3, then you play the Mightstone and a Weakstone on turn 4, because it's a 5 mana artifact, but with Erza it's 1 less, so it's 4 mana. When the Mightstone and Weakstone enters the battlefield, choose 1, draw 2 cards. Target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. and you can tap it for 2 mana. This mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells. So the nice thing is you can curve from Erza into the Might Stone and the Weak Stone. The Might Stone and the Weak Stone is then able to draw some cards, give some creatures -5/-5, and it helps you ramp up into artifact spells as well. The only downside here is that you cannot use the mana to cast non-artifact spells. However, you can use it for Urza's ability to activate it. Reason being is you're not spending or casting non-artifact spell, you're using its activate ability. That's different. So the Might Stone and the Weak Stone comes out 1 turn earlier with Erza, and then you can use the Might Stone and the Weak Stone on turn 5 to add 2 more mana, giving you 7 if you curve out perfectly. So by turn 5, you can have what is Erza Planeswalker. Legendary Planeswalker Erza with loyalty 7, which is pretty high. You may activate the loyalty abilities of Erza Planeswalker twice each turn rather than only once, which is really solid. The +2 is artifact, instant, and sorcery spells you cast this turn cost 2 less to cast, and you gain 2 life. So if you activate that twice, that's 4 less to cast, and you gain 4 life. There are some very powerful artifacts in this set. +1, draw 2 cards, discard a card. 0, create 2 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens. So again, if you just need some protection, you can pump out 4 tokens. Exile target non-land permanent for -3. You can do that twice because it has 7 loyalty. -10, artifacts and planeswalkers you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Destroy all non-land permanents. That's very, very powerful. So again, all in all, both Erza and Mishra, the Meld effects are very powerful, and if they enter the battlefield, the game is going to change drastically, and somebody's going to have to do something about that quick. So now that we're past all this stuff that's not stuff I wanted to put in the top 10, let's start with the top 10. So for number 10, I put Harbin Vanguard Aviator for a white and a blue. It's a legendary creature, human soldier with flying. It's a 3/2. So let's stop there for a second. 2 mana, flying, 3/2. 2 mana creatures are getting crazier every set. So we got a 2 mana, flying, 3/2. Whenever you attack with 5 or more soldiers, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain flying until end of turn. Why I put this here, soldiers is going to be big after this set. There's a lot of soldier support, and we already have a couple really strong soldiers in standard. Being that it has flying on a 3/2 body for 2 mana, it's super aggressive, and this really guarantees that if you get multiple soldiers on the board, you have instant evasion, and you bump all your stuff. All in all, very, very powerful. I really don't think it's going to be hard to get the white and blue mana because, again, there's so much mana support now with the pain lands, with the slow lands, triomes, everything that's out there right now. This is going to be pretty easy to cast on turn 2. Having a flyer 3/2, and then later having great soldier support. I think this is going to be a very powerful card, and we're going to see this a lot. Going to number 9. Cityscape Leveler for 8 mana. Artifact creature construct. It's an 8/8 with trample. When you cast a spell and whenever Cityscape Leveler attacks, destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a tapped Power Stone token. It has Unearth for 8. I know you're probably thinking like, hey, this is just another, I forgot the name now, but there's a 7 mana Golem artifact that enters the battlefield to destroy something. This is significantly better because it has an 8/8 with trample, so it has a really good body on it too. And honestly, I don't think 8 mana is a lot for an artifact in this set because we have so many things that create treasure tokens. We have a lot of the Power Stone tokens that are going to help cast artifacts early. We have a lot of other support like Erza that can get this out sooner. I think all in all, Cityscape Leveler is going to start coming out by like turn 5 or 6 a lot, if not sooner. There's going to be ways to cheat it in. And then if it has Unearth where it has haste, it's just gonna start really destroying things quickly, and it has a big body to be aggressive as well. So this is a great card for the reason that it gives you some control, it gives you some removal, but it also gives you a big aggressive creature. So it's one of those where this enters the battlefield, it destroys a blocker or destroys a big threat, and then from there it just tramples over some little creatures. So all in all, super powerful card. I think this is going to see a lot of play. I'm looking forward to building around this for sure. Going to number 8. Play Champion. As X and 4 for an artifact creature construct. It's a 2/2. It enters the battlefield with 3+1/+1 counters on it for each double green spent to cast it. When Clay Champion enters the battlefield, choose up to 2 other target creatures you control. For each double white spent to cast Clay Champion, put a +1/+1 counter on each of them. That's a lot of text, but basically what that means is you can cast this for 4 mana. Let's say you play mono green. That's the main reason I put this in there, because in mono green this thing's pretty stupid. Say you play mono green, and you just cast this with 4 green. It enters the battlefield with 3+1/+1 counters on for each double green cast on it. So that's twice. So it's going to enter the battlefield with 6 +1/+1 counters on it. So you're going to have an 8/8 for 4 mana. It doesn't have trample, but that's an 8/8 for 4. That's very powerful. If you play this in Celestia, maybe you use 2 green and 2 white, then it's going to enter as a 5/5 for 4, and you're going to put a +1/+1 counter on 2 other creatures. Again, very powerful. So in Celestia and green, it's got strong. White, I don't know how much support it'll have in just mono white, simply because it's coming in as a 4 mana 2/2 that puts a bunch of +1/+1 counter on other creatures. Not bad, but not as good. So I think really Celestia or mono green is where you're going to see this. If you have a lot of mana to pump into it, it's obviously going to go bigger, because you don't have to just cap yourself with 4 mana. You can do 4 and X, so you can put as much mana into this as you want to buff all your stuff, or to just make this as big as you want it. So all in all, I think we're going to see this a lot. It's a big dumb creature that can possibly buff your other stuff. It's a pretty straightforward card, but I think it's going to see a lot of play because it can be very aggressive. Number 7. For number 7, I got Portal to Phyrexia for 9 mana, and it's an artifact. For a second there, I was afraid this was going to be too expensive of a card for just an artifact, but let me read it. When Portal to Phyrexia enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. At the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. So this is going to be awesome in a Reanimator shell. You're going to be able to take out a bunch of your opponent's creatures, and then you can just start generating value by putting a nutty creature on the board every turn, as long as you have this artifact on the board. This is going to take over games quickly. In a Reanimator shell, this is very powerful. Even if it's just if you're not playing Reanimator, you play a really hardcore control deck, and you just use this to start recycling your opponent's creatures as you remove them. All in all, very, very powerful. 9 mana is a lot, but like I said with the previous one, we have a lot of power stones, a lot of ways to make artifacts cheaper, or even to cheat them out. So I think there's going to be ways to get this out early and really start making a difference and turning the game around. If you do not deal with Portal to Phyrexia, you will lose the game. So, very powerful card. Number 6. Morel, Shield of Argive for 3 and a white, legendary creature, human soldier. It's a 3/4. During your turn, your opponent can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. Whenever Morel, Shield of Argive attacks, create X 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. Very, very powerful, because the 3/4 on 4 mana by itself is not great, but the fact that your opponent is basically, all they can do is block with what they have. They can't even activate their Reckoner Bankbuster. They can't activate their Treasure tokens. They can't respond with the Wandering Emperor. They cannot counter your spells if it's your turn. Once this is on the board and resolved, until they get rid of it, your turn, you are safe to do whatever. You can see the blocks that are there. You can kind of expect what they're going to do, because there's no other interactions possible. They're not going to activate their artifacts. There's no spells they can cast. That's it. This is it. So you're going to be able to determine really easily if you can attack safely with Morel and generate all those soldier tokens, which, again, soldiers, once you start generating a few of them, it's really going to start adding up. There's a lot of way to buff your soldiers. So I think this is going to be a very powerful 4-drop in any soldier or aggressive deck. So even if it's not a soldier-based aggro deck, if it's going to run white, I would expect Morel, Shield of Argive in there. Super powerful card. It's really going to make it hard for control decks. So we're at number 5. Monastery Swift Spear. 1 red for a creature human monk. It's a 1/2 with haste and prowess. We've seen this card before. It's very powerful in multiple formats. I can see this being incredibly powerful in this standard. So right now, mono blue is a deck to really worry about. We've seen some Izzet spell decks that are powerful. However, it hasn't really broken to the tier 1 ranks yet. I think Monastery Swift Spirit is going to make a difference in that. Putting Monastery Swift Spirit and like a Haughty Djinn together is going to make for some very scary decks. This is going to get out of control fast. It's going to be very hard for your opponents to deal with. This is very, very aggressive. Whether it's going to be in an Izzet deck or just mono red, like burn decks, there's going to be multiple ways that Monastery Swift Spirit is going to be very, very powerful in those decks, and it's going to turn the game quickly if you don't deal with it. Number 4, Mishra Tamer of Makfawa. Mishra Tamer of Makfawa comes on the battlefield for 3, a black and a red. It's a 4/4 legendary creature, Human Artificer. Permanents you control have a ward, sacrifice a permanent. Each artifact creature, or artifact card, each artifact card in your graveyard has unearth for 1 black and a red. That is nuts. So 5 mana for 4/4 is not cheap. It's not wonderful, I'm not gonna lie. However, already making it to where any kind of interaction with any of your permanents creates a ward, sacrifice a permanent is very powerful, but especially that creating that unearth effect for all your artifact cards in your graveyard for 1 black and red. So think back on the portal to Phyrexia. Instead of 9 mana, you can put it on the battlefield for 3 mana. It doesn't stay on the battlefield, so you don't get the upkeep effect, but your opponent has to sacrifice 3 of their creatures. Or if you have some of the other bigger artifacts that are in the set, being able to bring them back for a turn for 3 mana, that's pretty crazy. Even if it's just to get an 8/8 trampler with removal on the board for 1 turn, 3 mana, that's crazy. So Mishra Tamer of Makfawa is going to be a great way to cheat out artifacts for value, for low amount of mana, and it's going to be hard to interact with unless you have a lot of permanents to sacrifice. So very powerful card. I really look forward to seeing what I can come up with building this. Like, I will definitely build a deck around this. We're at the top 3. Number 3, I got Blade Coil Serpent, X and 6 for an artifact creature Serpent. It's a 5/4. When Blade Coil Serpent enters the battlefield for each double blue spent to cast it, draw a card. When it enters the battlefield for each double black spent to cast it, each opponent discards a card. When it enters the battlefield for each red spent to cast it, it gets +1/+0 and gains trample and haste until end of turn. It's a lot of text. For a second there, when I first saw this card, I just read that for if you spend double blue, if you spend double black, or if you spend double red. So I thought, okay, cool, good card. If you get maximum value like Grixis, you can get double blue, double black, double red. You draw a card, each opponent discards a card and gets +1/+0 and gains trample, which is great and haste. Then I realized that it's for each. So if you play this like, let's say, mono blue, you spend 6 mana on it, you draw 3 cards. Same with black, 3 discards. Same with red, +3/+0 and it gains trample and haste. So all in all, just a lot of value there in those mono-colored colors. But also, again, if you have a mana sink into it, or if you play Grixis colors or any combination thereof, you can be flexible in what you want from this card. So it's a very flexible card, and it has a strong body on it. It's not like you're just putting a small creature on the board. This creature an opponent's going to want to deal with because it's going to take life total off quickly, especially if you guess that double red on it. What I like about it is the mana sink effect, again, just like the other card where it's 6x. So you don't just have to stop at 6. You can go more if you want to. If you feel safe tapping out on this, you can really get some crazy value out of this card. So all in all, really great design, really cool. It's going to see a lot of play in a lot of different types of decks, I would imagine. Number 2, Lord's Escape for 1 white, an instant. Target artifact or creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Scry 1. Common on number 2, which is kind of nuts if you think about it. However, thinking of these kind of cards before, thinking of like Snakeskin Veil, that got a lot of play in mono green. Tamio Safekeeping, that's currently still in a lot of sideboards, sometimes even in the main deck. Those cards are very powerful. This is both. This is the Snakeskin Veil and Tamio Safekeeping, and it can hit artifacts or creatures. And then you have this Scry 1. There is no downside to playing this. You will, if you play white and you have any kind of creatures or artifacts, you're probably going to want to play this if it's a more aggressive deck, aggressive to mid-range, because it protects your stuff for 1 white. That is an incredible upside. There's no downside to playing this card. The Scry 1 is just icing on the cake. But just the fact that it gives hexproof and indestructible makes it to where we no longer have to choose between Snakeskin Veil and Tamiyo Safekeeping. Do I want to be able to survive board wipes? Do I want to be able to avoid getting removal played on it specifically? It's incredible. It's a very powerful card, and I feel like this is going to see a lot of play. Every mono white deck is going to play this. I would not be surprised if Monastery Swift Spirit is going to find some Jeskai shells to play. So we have Lawrence Escape in combination with the red and the blue spells, or maybe even a Boros burn deck that runs Lawrence Escape. Lawrence Escape is going to make a huge difference in aggressive decks that want to run some spells to protect their stuff or gain extra value. And if you are playing against these decks, you're really going to want to be careful of not playing removal on those moments where it's like, okay, if this removal doesn't go through, like I kind of have to be greedy here. So if I wait a turn and then remove the creature, I can do this. No, play it safe because Lawrence Escape is going to turn games around. Very powerful card. And I think also, if I'm not mistaken, this is probably the most efficient one-drop protection card anywhere, really. So I would not be surprised if you're going to see this in other formats too, like Feathered or Redeemed comes to mind. They're going to want to run this card as well. So very, very, very powerful design. All right, we're down to number one. Number one, what could it be? So, so far we've had some really powerful artifacts that really make a big difference on the game, big impact. We've had ways to cheat artifacts on the board. We've had ways to protect our stuff. And we've had some powerful creatures that are very aggressive and can really take over the game. So what is number one? Number one is the Ferry Temporal Pilgrim. 3, a blue, and a blue for Legendary Planeswalker Ferry with 4 loyalty. Whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Ferry Temporal Pilgrim. 0, draw a card. -2, create a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance, and whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. -12, target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns to its owner's hand. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's library. That's a lot. At first glance, doesn't look fantastic. 5 mana, 4 loyalty is a little odd. Typically, mana and loyalty match. But the fact that whenever you draw a card, it gets a loyalty counter, it's not just once a turn. It's every card you draw, it gets a loyalty counter. Start a turn, loyalty counter. Connive effect, loyalty counters. Any kind of card drive, it gets a loyalty counter. So the 0 effect of draw a card, that's a loyalty counter. The fact that it can protect itself right away with a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance is very powerful. The fact that it's vigilance is even better because it can start attacking but still defend the Ferry the next turn. And it's going to get big quickly because every time you draw a card, it gets a +1/+1 counter as well. Not just your second card each turn, which is typically how these kinds of effects tend to work. It's every time you draw a card. These creatures are going to get big, the Ferry is going to get big, and think of the decks that are already powerful in the formats. Esper with a lot of connive effects, and Grixis that also has some card draw in it. They're both probably going to be running Teferi, but especially Connive. Esper Connive is already really powerful. And being able to run Teferi, let's say you play Teferi on turn 5, and then you attack with some Connive creatures, and you draw 3 or 4 cards. Boom, you got an 8 loyalty Teferi on the board. If you first create your 2/2 blue spirit creature token before you attack with your Connive creature, and you draw 3 or 4 cards, and suddenly you have a 5/5 or 6/6 on the board with Vigilance, alongside having 6 loyalty on your Teferi. So Teferi is going to grow big real quickly, real easily, and the 2/2 blue spirit creature tokens are going to get really big really quickly. And the fact that they have Vigilance is just incredible. It makes them very strong defenders that can also attack and be really aggressive because of how easily they will grow. And they will grow every turn, even if you don't have any additional card draw. So all in all, very powerful, very aggressive, but also great because it can just draw a card each turn. If that's all it does is draw a card each turn, alongside having tokens on the board or whatnot. Getting to the -12 ability, all in all, when it enters the battlefield, you will have to have drawn 8 cards with Teferi on the board if you don't minus it at all. So you're not going to get there super fast, but also if you look at these decks, it's not going to take that long to get there either. I would not be surprised if people are going to get -12 by Teferi once this hits standard. So I think Teferi Temporal Pilgrim is a very, very powerful card, probably one of the strongest Planeswalkers we've seen in a while, as in that it can really turn the game around. We've had some strong Planeswalker. Wandering Emperor sees play in every white deck. Um, and it's strong in its own way, but Teferi Temporal Pilgrim will finish games. So that's why I put it at number one. So, all right, that's my list. I hope you really enjoyed it as I talked about this top 10. Again, if you have other opinions, feel free to put them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe if you do enjoy the video. I might come out with more in the future again as my schedule kind of changed. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Have a good one and enjoy Brothers War when it comes out. I know I will.